When growth stalls, most leaders reach for surface fixes like new campaigns, a sharper sales deck, even new hires. But the real issues are often deeper, such as misaligned systems, broken handoffs, or unreliable data. That's why we built the Growth Readiness Score. In just 5 minutes, you'll get a clear score across 4 critical areas of your revenue operations and see how you stack up against your peers with benchmark data. Tap the link in the show notes to get started. It's quick, insightful, and often reveals issues leaders don't expect.
What are the most important use cases driven by where are we inefficient? Where are we slow? Where do we have problems? What is a problem we can solve? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just digital transformation. This is automation. And so what task has lots of hands on it and is inefficient? What task is prone to error? What task is taking us days or weeks? And we could change the status quo if we could turn days and weeks into minutes and hours.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Today, I'm joined by Scott Litman, SVP at Capacity and the founder of Lucy AI, which was acquired by Capacity in 2024. He guided Lucy's integration into Capacity's AI platform, now serving over 2,500 companies, and currently leads product innovation and integration strategies for enterprise-scale AI solutions. He's a long-standing AI advocate, known for helping enterprises move past AI hype toward measurable business outcomes. Welcome back to the RevOps Champions podcast, Scott.
Thank you for having me again.
Scott, a lot has happened since you were on the show a few years ago. You built an AI business, Lucy, which of course was then acquired by Capacity last year, which seems super exciting for those two companies and the other sort of merged companies to sort of scale together. What key developments have influenced your business and leadership approach in the last few years?
I'll say the business and leadership, one of the things is that my business partner, Dan, and I have been proponents of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. We have been using it actually since 2008. We had started working with a company then called Reside that joined forces with Magnet 360, and it was a requirement we would be a traction company. And we have been more and more immersed in it over time. I'm on the board of a company or when I'm an advisor to a company, one of the requirements is we're going to be an EOS company. And I feel like EOS is critical to help management teams work together to leverage all of the talents of that team and make sure everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction, that meetings result in clear actions and people are accountable to those actions and move forward with them. So huge fans of EOS and traction, and it's something that's in all of the businesses I've worked on or work with.
So essentially what you're saying is from a leadership perspective, nothing new. You're using the same EOS framework that you've been using for a couple of decades now.
I think it's 2 decades. We've
been
at it.
It feels like it though, right?
It does feel like it. I will say that we get better and better at it, and we have been constantly evolving. But yeah, that has been core to how we run companies.
Yeah. Scott, we're sort of heading into Q4 2025, and I mean, you're sort of at the epicenter of, and you have been for a number of years now, of what's essentially disrupting every business on the planet, which of course is AI. But one of the things that I often talk about and remind myself about is, change is inevitable, and we have to be open to change, but we also have to remind ourselves of what things stay the same. Do you have a principle or a mantra you lean on during, times of sort of making big or, big decisions and uncertainty or through the sort of next phase of growth?
Yeah, well, a core value of the last 3 companies I've led has been constant evolution. And so we've really baked into the DNA of everything we operated, the idea that there is going to be constant evolution. Now, the pace of change is much faster today than it was, say, 3 companies ago, or even with Magnet 360, 2 companies ago. But We always had the idea that if we sit still, the world is going to pass us by. If we're not constantly innovating and looking for what's next, somebody else will get there before we do. And that whatever we do today is important and as differentiation will lose its differentiation and what makes it important in 6 to 12 months. And so the idea is that we are always moving, we're always evolving. And in that regard, it's just kind of baked into what we do that we know the world is going to be changing on us.
Absolutely. And I think with that, of course, the change is what we as humans, both the leaders and the teams that we work with, have to go through. So as you're preparing your teams, and as the rest of us are preparing our teams and rethinking our processes to get real business value from AI, how do you think about that?
Well, the first
Let's
is
do it.
when we say AI, we have all been living with AI for pretty much our adult lifetimes. And I was doing a keynote at a global event for a Fortune 500, and this was a year and a half ago. I said, show of hands, how long have people been working with AI? Have you been working with 6 months, 12? And people would put up their hands at different times. By the time I got to 2 years, most of the hands had already gone up. What we were really talking about, what we were really hearing was not AI. They were hearing generative AI. Generative AI has been with us almost 3 years at this point. It exists further back than that. OpenAI started championing generative AI in 2018, but it really didn't fall on the radar of 99% of humanity until November of 2022. And so when people talk about AI, they're talking about generative AI, and particularly for the people that are the practitioners of RevOps. We truly have been dealing with AI, not just because it drives newsfeed or it's in Google, the optimization of search, the tools that we use in HubSpot and other marketing automation platforms to figure out how to optimize our campaigns have been using AI for a very long time. So I think one of the key things is just understanding there is a lens of AI that is generative AI, and that's what everybody talks about these days. The other thing about it is the benefits of generative AI are very unequal. And when I say that, individuals have incredible superpowers provided to them through their use of AI, whether you use Grok, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever your LLM of choice is. It is unbelievable how much is packed into either free or $20 a month, depending on where you land on this stuff. And there are things that we can't imagine doing today without the benefit of these tools. And yet inside of a company, particularly if we're talking about companies with, say, 50 employees or more. So let's talk 50 employees to 50,000. The benefits are not the same. The public tools that individuals get to use are fed on billions of data points, a massive fire hose of public content, as well as a lot of copywritten content they probably should not have had access to. And that'll get settled one way or another through legal processes at this point. But the public tools have massive amounts of data. But the biggest company, by comparison, have a thimbleful of data. Target's, Amazon's, Walmart's don't have anything that's close to the volume of data that's in the public domain. And it causes issues with how tools are being used in the enterprise. I saw a report out of MIT in August, so it's only a month old. And they said that since November of 2022, that only 5% of the enterprise POCs or dev projects have gone production. Now, I think that's a grimmer stat than is real, but the MIT report cited that very few of the things that were spun up actually went to full production in our enterprise. EDC has some measures. Theirs are closer to 80% not moving forward and 20%, 15 to 20% that have moved on. But it's indicative that a lot of money has been spent in the enterprise on these tools. But the struggle to find which is the right use case. How are we going to get safe, secure access to data? How are we going to have high enough quality of data? How are we going to make sure that these things are used properly and move from proof of concept to production has been very challenging. I was at an event with leadership from Anthropic and OpenAI about 4 or 5 months ago now. It was put on by Gene Munster and his his team at Loop Ventures, and they have tremendous access to leadership. And it was interesting to see the leadership of these companies saying, we still haven't found our footing in the enterprise. We're still having all these POCs, all this testing, and it's getting better and better every day. But it's not like we have the killer story about how we've transformed the lives of 50,000 employees. So it's something, it's not to say the stories don't exist, but AI has failed in the enterprise. It just is different than what happens for the individual. The individual is using these tools every day for a variety of use cases. And at the enterprise, we have to be really good problem selectors to determine what are the problems that we should be automating and that can be automated at scale and successfully.
Using whatever set of AI tools.
Yes.
Right. And Scott, when you talk about enterprise, so at the very beginning of that, you were talking about, 50 to 50,000 person companies, and you were saying how the benefits for those different size companies are quite different, right? But then you went on to talk about enterprises some more. When you talk about enterprise, what size businesses are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I started by saying 50 to 50,000, and what I wanted to, why I used that was just to say it is beyond the personal tools. Once you get to 50 people, you may ad hoc have 50 people that are using their LLM of choice.
Mm-hmm.
But as a company, have you been able to create a solution that uses AI that impacts all employees? And
Right.
so whether it's 50 employees to 50,000, this is a problem that is widespread. But you're right. When I say enterprise, I start thinking more Fortune 500, because that's where a lot of the customers that I worked with and Lucy and now work with as capacity are that. And I wanted to go there just to say that even the biggest companies are having challenges with, regardless of budget, but with the right way to deploy this stuff.
Right. As you were sort of alluding to, I mean, in some ways you kind of said quite explicitly. So those companies have the benefit of having data to work with, right? Which a lot of smaller companies, whether they're 50 or few, or fewer people, the challenge that companies of that size have is that they don't have a lot of data. But in some ways, I guess they're leveraging data in the public domain, to your point, which again is sort of. So you're suggesting that's somewhat of a leveling of the playing field for smaller businesses?
That's an interesting take on it, and in a way it does. But here's the thing we talk about with the enterprise customer, which is we get complaints where they'll say people are so used to using ChatGPT, they're so used to using Claude, they are spurning the tools that the enterprise supports.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll take a hypothetical in this market because it's not our customer. I'll say a General Mills. Imagine an employee at General Mills, not our customer, uses ChatGPT to do their research. Are they going to get results from their queries? Absolutely. Are their results going to be based on quality industry information? Maybe. Maybe the results are coming from a blogger or somebody on Reddit, or I should say being influenced by or being driven by.
Yeah.
Maybe it's PR from a competitor of General Mills, versus if I'm an employee of General Mills and I'm doing research on our products, on our audiences, it is coming from the research I've either paid for from third parties, or it's the research that we have done internally. It is deemed a quality source of data. It is something that we can point back to and say, okay, we did this study with this vendor 3 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. It's not from the domain. And so there is a difference in quality of data. The challenge is the person who uses Claude or ChatGPT doesn't think about it. They ask the question, they get an answer in 2 seconds, they check the box and say, I got what I need. Is it factual? Is it accurate? Is it really informed? Who knows?
Right.
Did they go deep into the well and look through every reference to figure out where this stuff came from? Versus when it's inside the enterprise, you still actually need to burrow down and make sure you know where it came from. But you are working with a trusted source of data. But the experience with the enterprise tools is not as fast or slick or sometimes as seemingly comprehensive as the public tools. And so it creates this really weird split. We're used to one user experience, one level of access. in our private lives. And it's very different in our corporate lives.
Do you want to sort of unpack a little more the differences between personal use of generative AI and company use of AI?
Well, one of the things that happens in a lot of smaller companies that we see today is people are just ad hoc using the tools. I mean, they are using their personal tools in business, particularly when you talk about smaller companies up to 50 employees, or even we'll sometimes meet, I'll do strategy for companies that might have 100 employees and they don't yet have an AI policy. They have employees using things ad hoc. They may have one directive, which is to say, don't publish or push our documents into these systems.
Mm-hmm.
But they're trying, individuals are trying to figure out how to use this stuff as best they can based on their personal experiences in business. And you get very uneven result.
Right. Right. So some of the other statistics that you and I have both heard, and pretty much everybody who's listening has heard before, because this has been shared for at least the last 9 months on all types of media, which is, so every survey of leadership of companies across the board on the importance of AI, the responses come back that over 95% of leaders agree that the future of AI is absolutely unquestionable. But then when they get the next question, which is, well, how many of you are actually doing something about it? The response is less than 5%, which means that what businesses from that are, whether they're 5 people or 5,000 people or 50,000 people, they're all, I'm guessing the ones that are 5,000 and bigger at least have some form of investment of to figure out what their roadmap and whatever that entails is. What advice do you have for EOS companies from that perspective on like how to get started with AI?
So a number of things. The first is that this is a wave of digital transformation, not really different than other waves that you and I have been through in our careers. There's been waves of digital transformation around mobile. There were waves around e-commerce. There were waves around different phases of the web as it became more personalized.
Mhm.
And any one of these phases is the moment where there is so much hype and so much excitement and that feeling that everybody's doing it but us. And we're in that right now with AI. And there are going to be winners and losers. There's going to be businesses that figure out how to adopt this stuff correctly for their business faster than others. They will get short-term wins or benefits against competition that doesn't figure it out as well, but the wins won't be permanent either. When I say that the competition will eventually figure it out, whether it takes them 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, however long. So, try to be disruptive as quickly as you can. Try to be a winner instead of a laggard.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a good window where this stuff is maturing, where you're not an early adopter if you're doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is there is some low-hanging fruit. When I do strategy for businesses of almost any size, one of the things we find is that the first step is to make sure that there are AI policies and procedures on use. What are the approved tools? How do you use them? Which use cases do you use them on? What are the prohibitions or permissions towards use of data? How is company data can be used? Should we license directly from Microsoft or ChatGPT or Anthropic an LLM that is ours alone, where we can benefit from this, but we also can put our information in, and it is prohibited from its being shared to the greater whole. There are industry-specific tools that take the foundational AI and wrap them up in things that can be used in industries like financial services and other regulated industries. So having policies and procedures in place is one of the least expensive things a business can do to make sure it's getting consistent benefit. The other thing is training. And if you've ever watched a 20-something use these tools versus I'm a 50-something, and I'd like to think I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I watch my son with very limited business experience, and I see him spinning the Rubik's Cube at light speed, and I'm slowly chunking it around by comparison. How do you make sure that all of the people in your company are understanding how this stuff works, how to use it best? Because these skills are even, and sometimes it's even generational. So the training side of it, so that an organization is getting full benefits, is a very inexpensive way to make sure this stuff is working. And then, right next after that is, what are the most important use cases driven by where are we inefficient? Where are we slow? Where do we have problems? What is a problem we could solve? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just digital transformation, this is automation.
Hmm.
And so, what task has lots of hands on it and is inefficient? What task is prone to error? What task is taking us days or weeks? And we could change the status quo if we could turn days and weeks into minutes and hours. And then,
Absolutely.
as much as I'm saying that a lot of stuff that was in POC or testing hasn't gone to production, if you're really good at identifying the problem and building very purposefully the solution that overcomes that problem, you can be very successful, just like in prior waves of digital transformation and technology.
The thing you've been talking about, one thing that we've been talking a lot about, especially in the last couple of weeks since we came back from HubSpot's big inbound event in San Francisco, they did an incredible job of really showing what is happening and what is going to happen, right? And as they always do incredibly well, is create new playbooks to deal with the change that has happened and that will continue to happen, right? So they came out on stage, the CEO and some of the most senior leadership at HubSpot, and just said, look, the inbound playbook that we built this business around for the last 19 years doesn't work anymore. We have to create a new playbook for the AI era. What they did was they just introduced the concept, which is called the Loop Marketing Playbook, which is the Infinity Loop. And I think that was a good tease. What they're going to be working on now for the next 3, 6, 9 months is actually making that more practical, in this case, for marketers and sales folks to really figure out how to do that in the AI era. So what I'm realizing, what HubSpot's been doing for the last 2 years, as they've been rolling out all kinds of AI related products and agents, that engineering mindset, figure out where do we have problems that we can fix with automation. In fact, I was busy updating my signature in my email this morning, and I noticed that last year I put a quote at the bottom of the email that said, it's a Mark Twain quote, which says, "The secret of making progress is to get started." I mean, it's one of those one of those quotes that you can look at every 6 months and it's still true, right? And I think this is another. As I was listening to you, it's like that's the Mark Twain quote. It's, if you want to make progress, just start. Which again is that engineering approach. And you talked about, I think, option, and then you ended up talking about training. You talked about policies and procedures, which you said are pretty easy things to get started. Start with problems that you have, and then solve those, and then you'll kind of learn through the process. I want to dig a little more into the sort of the adoption and training piece, because I completely agree with you. Our business is very similar to what you guys were doing at Magnet, right? Which is, how do we help our clients adopt whatever the CRM technologies that they're using as that technology continues to evolve, right? So whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, they're all building more and more power into these products, every week, month, quarter. But then you talked about training, and you were saying that that's an easy part, but we see a lot of resistance because, of course, adoption and training are both parts of change management, and change management, as powerful it is and as necessary, it's never been more necessary in business than it is today, and will be for the next few years. But tell us more about how you think about adoption and training, and what makes it easy.
That's a great question. My first gig was at Microsoft a long time ago. I was there for all of a year, and something that stuck with me back then, so long ago, is I said, we put all these new features out and nobody uses more than 5% of any of it. And it's true. I mean, we all cut, copy, and paste. We all type. We all, bold, underline, and, there's a few features. There's like 1,000 things Word can do. And we probably all do 20 plus a couple of the tricks we picked up along the way. For years with Magnet 360, we were a platinum partner for Salesforce. Salesforce was constantly buying companies. Every year at Dreamforce, they'd come up with these grand proclamations of all, things that they would do. This was the era of name the technology. And yet at the end of the day, 95% of Salesforce usage is Salesforce CRM. And the other stuff is sprinkling here and there for specific use cases. And so the problem of tech adoption is industry-wide. Now, that said, something that we do at Capacity, and it's something we brought with from Lucy, is how are we going to help people on their journey of user adoption? We know we're not going to be able to teach people to do 100% of all things that we can do, but we focus on one core thing. And so, I'll use Capacity as the example. We're all about knowledge management. How can we connect to data within an enterprise? At a customer like Pepsi, who's a very large customer and has been a customer for 6 years, we connect to 800 SharePoints. We connect to 100 different tools, vendors, other things. So when somebody comes into that environment, there is so much available to them. How do we help them journey user adoption? First we do is we go through a persona exercise, and we want to understand a day in the life of that role. If somebody's a marketer, somebody's a market researcher, somebody's in sales, what are the things they do? How do they do it? What are their pain points? And then when we get into user adoption and training, we speak to them from the language of their pain points. We are doing this because we have heard through interviews with your colleagues that this is something that takes you days or weeks. We're going to show you how we can do this in minutes. And then we do onboarding, not generic, here's the training of Capacity. We do very specific training around the persona so that it's their language, it's their problems, it's their pain points, it's what they understand. And we recognize that audiences are fickle, that if it doesn't work for them, they're going to tune out and write it off forever. Think how many times you've downloaded an app to an iPhone, iPad, or an Android device, tapped on it once, and 30 seconds later got defeated by it and never, ever open it again. And it happens to all of us. We all use only 6 to 8 apps a day anyways. So we're defeated by the other 200 that never got the daily usage. So one of the things that's really critical in training or onboarding is making sure the first interaction is a successful one. If we know that they're in product research and we know the problems they have in product research, we are going to load up. Here is an example of how you use the system here. Or if it's sales, we're going to do it in the language of sales. And we're going to give them a couple of softballs. We're going to say, hands on keyboard, ask the system this, do this thing. Yeah. And we want them to be amazed and delighted and go, oh my gosh, that's incredible. We work with one of the biggest ad agencies that works on one of the biggest auto accounts. And I just remember from the very first day of onboarding for the champion of the system, he found something from a Super Bowl commercial the year before. And he said, I have been looking for this for a week, and I found it in 2 seconds. That moment of amazing delight made him a proponent of this system forever. So we need to make sure that all users, within some very tight guidelines, learn how to use the system and become successful with it. They can branch off and learn other things after that. Yeah. But there's a core purpose that has to be trained, and they must be successful in the first interactions or they are out.
But I want to also come back to something that you mentioned at the very beginning, which we've been hearing again for the last 2 weeks since coming back to San Francisco from Inbound, where HubSpot made over 200 announcements and can become very overwhelming very quickly. And we've been hearing this for 12 years from people. We have to tell them, look, we're only using 20% of what HubSpot can do. We're like, well, that's okay. As long as it's solving the business problems, whether it's HubSpot or Capacity or you name the technology, they're adding arrows to our quiver. You only pull that particular arrow out when you need it for that specific business problem. Don't think that you have to use them all.
I like to go with the golf bag analogy versus the arrows. Okay. Even though I'm not a golfer. I mean, other than going to Top Golf and hitting the giant targets, I'm not a golfer. But the golf bag, every club has a specific use. Even though I can't use it correctly, I know that it has a purpose. Now, the problem is with a system like HubSpot, the golf bag has 200 clubs now.
That's right. That's the challenge. Yeah. Yeah,
So I don't envy the challenge you have in that you've got to be the best advisors on which clubs to use.
sure, absolutely. But again, that's part of our why businesses partner with us
Hmm.
is we know how to match the business problem to the tools that are available to them, and then build those tools, integrate those tools with what everything else that they've used, and then train the specific people on how those tools are going to help them in their daily lives.
100%.
Funny you mentioned the golf bag thing as opposed to the quiver and the arrows, different clubs in the bag. The Bushmen or the Khoisan, the area that I grew up in Southern Africa, they might have only had 4 or 5 arrows in their quiver. Every arrow had a different use. There was one has a sharper point, the other one has a broader point, depending on what they want the arrow to do for the specific job. But I like the golf bag analogy; it's a lot easier. Okay, so where does that leave us? We talked a little bit about like evaluating, AI opportunities. I think we've covered that, unless there's anything else you can think of there.
We got it pretty well covered.
Yeah. What else? Where do we go from here? Because I think a lot of this comes down to overwhelm and the strategic leadership is required for businesses to navigate next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months until, I'm guessing this technology, we've been through multiple, whether it was the dot-com boom or the
Yeah.
'08 sort of
Remember when
deal.
people used to put an E in front of business because it was
Yes.
e-business, it wasn't business. And we're going to go through the same thing with AI. There are
Right.
businesses that are trying to think, I have to let the world know I'm using AI. It's going to impact my valuation. It's going to make me more attractive to investors. And it's like, it's just all going to be business. It's all going to be part of your tech stack. It is all going to be routine. And it's not going to be a differentiator anymore than if you use the technology tools better than your competition, you can win. It's just a part of the set of tools that businesses have.
Right. Let's ask the question differently. So, based on what we've just been talking about, knowing the challenges that businesses of all sizes and types have right now as they're planning how much demand is there from our clients to assist them in their AI adoption journey? And our response is not we haven't really had much demand. Why is that? You cannot go anywhere without reading about AI and the impacts on a business. And it finally clicked for me a month or two ago. At this time last year, when companies were doing their planning and their budgeting for 2025, I think 95% of companies did not have an AI budget, which is why we are 3/4 of the way through 2025, and if no one set aside a budget to invest in this, never mind the roadmap and the strategy and making sure you have the right people because no one's ever created the program before. If you are currently planning for 2026, make sure you're strategic about planning and budgeting for how you incorporate AI into your business in 2026.
I think that budgeting is certainly part of it. And I agree. Make sure there's a budget for 2026. The other thing is that in the first wave of all of this, so we go back to November of 2022. So, or just we'll go Q1 2023, because that's when businesses started to like, what the hell are we going to do? In the first wave of it, and this is one of the big drivers on why so many POCs didn't work, is IT, particularly inside of mid-sized and larger companies. So now let's say companies of 1,000 employees or more. IT ran around carrying a hammer. And they said, Microsoft or OpenAI has given us a hammer. And the business stakeholders, they were seeing all this hype around AI, but they didn't know what to do with it. So they let the people with the hammer pound nails. And they pounded lots of nails. They're like, look at this capability. Look at this neat thing I can do. They didn't know, did it solve an actual problem? The business leaders didn't know what to ask for. And
Yeah.
so 2023 was a lot of that,
Yeah.
even in 2024. One of the things that we see today in the market is businesses are actively looking for where they think expertise is going to live. To your earlier argument, the job of the professional service provider, like the way you guys are with HubSpot, is to understand that there's 200 new arrows or clubs being mixed in with hundreds of prior arrows or clubs, depending on which analogy.
Mhm.
If I'm the customer, on my own, I have no idea which club to pick up. I need to trust somebody doesn't, even if it looks easy. Like even if it looks like I grab a club and swing, it looks easy. I
Mm.
need to trust a professional that truly understands which club for which or arrow for
Hmm.
which problem. And the same is true of all AI consulting. I'll say that I have the benefit that I have been, for over 25 years involved in digital transformation. Lucy was started 6 years prior to people thinking about the use of AI for this kind of data retrieval. We had
Mm.
been at it for a while. We've seen a lot of stuff. We've integrated with a lot of systems. We work with a lot of really tricky enterprise security. When somebody has a conversation with a member of my team in an area that we have expertise, it's closer to like when you go to the Mayo Clinic, where you're getting the doctor that's done 1,000 or 5,000 of the hard procedures. You're
Hmm.
not going to somebody who caught wind of this 2.5 years ago and decided they were an expert a year ago.
Hmm.
It's different. And so you need to combine true expertise and understanding of industries, technologies, and tools, plus the latest of AI, and be able to put it together. And so the world does need to work with the right experts on these things.
Right. Which is part of the dilemma that you described before, right? Q1 2023, all these mid-market companies um, were saying, okay, guys, what are we doing about AI? And the IT leader said, oh, well, we have two options. It's IBM or I think at that point it was Anthropic,
Over the last
ChatGPT,
2
right?
years,
Yeah,
it's largely been it's Microsoft, it's OpenAI, and some businesses might have,
OpenAI. Yeah,
Anthropic or something. And by the way, Microsoft just OpenAI under Microsoft's brand. You know, it's Microsoft is Azure OpenAI service. They invested $10 billion into OpenAI. This is about to change. The relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI is changing. But when people say, I'm going to use, Microsoft for AI, they're just using OpenAI under the umbrella of Microsoft and integrated into the Microsoft tech stack.
so these thousands or tens of thousands of IT leaders in these mid-market companies in Q1 of 2023 were okay. Well, these are the two options. No one will ever lose their job for choosing IBM, right?
And now is nobody will lose their job for choosing Microsoft. But yes,
Right, right.
if you
And
pick
well,
IBM, you're going to lose your job today. But
exactly. But I guess just because it's Microsoft or whatever comes next, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do. It's because the leaders who are telling the person with the hammer,
yes,
you are the expert. Trust you. Choose whatever they think has the least chance of them losing their job. Right, which is an interesting thing to
very
think about.
safe decision to work with Microsoft.
Very interesting, Scott. As we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you to leave our listeners with one or two last pieces of advice as they plan for 2026.
Yeah. Think the I think the thing that has been kind of the theme of this discussion is obviously this is all here to stay. It's a permanent change and one that's rapidly evolving. If you are a business leader, you don't have to have FOMO and feel like everybody else is doing it. It does feel like everybody else is doing it because of the discussion we had on personal usage.
Hmm.
Businesses are still trying to find those big successes and use cases. And so really look at what are the biggest problems where you could automate. It's actually, I think even it's less intimidating when you say we're talking about automation because we've been using automation for our entire lifetimes. AI is just a form of automation. So find the problem that needs to be automated and improved. And that's where you focus your energy. The other thing I'll say is don't be deceived by the POC. And it has never been easier to create a POC that looks like it can do the job, but it is hard to go from POC to production. Make sure before you unleash your new toy to your audience that you have tested it rigorously around all of the uses and use cases and know that you've gone from parlor trick of POC that looks great, something that actually solves a problem and works every day.
Hmm. And you're speaking specifically to companies who are trying to figure out how to build essentially their own internal AI engine using various tools and technologies, but where they essentially start with something that they can build on over time that they can control?
Yeah, I mean, a business can create a POC of an idea in whether we want to say minutes or hours, and it looks like something. Like in the old days when people would see a mock-up of a website and the boss would walk in, they'd see it on the screen. They say, "Great, are we ready to launch Monday?" And you're like, we're just going through the approval of the mock-up. We still have to build this thing for the next 90 days. And there would be a disconnect. We see the same thing with POCs today. People use these really cool tools like Lovable. They do vibe coding. They build stuff that, in an afternoon, they go into the meeting and they look like the star. Because look at this cool thing. It's got full navigation and features. I can type in a question, something happens. But if you then unleash it on all the things that are in production, it falls apart in seconds. And it goes from parlor trick to, in this case, a path to nowhere. And so we have to have the same discipline around security, scalability, data, testing, and making sure these things actually go from a vibe coded POC to a production app. It's actually never been easier to make something look like something and harder to get to production.
That's really interesting. Which a lot of entrepreneurial businesses, any company, you name the size, that's still being run by the founders. One of the things we know about entrepreneurs is we don't have unrealistic goals. We just have unrealistic timelines, right? And if you can see something that looks like you want it to look, it's going to take us a few months. It's really interesting.
Yep.
Scott, thanks again so much for being on the show. Great to catch up, and we'll continue to follow your success at Capacity and all the other things that you do here in the local community in the Twin Cities.
It is great to see you. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Scott.